In many ways, getting here today was the easy part. What comes next is essential. We cannot do this alone.
That was Chesa Boudin on the night he won election as San Francisco's district attorney 2 years ago. This week, he's facing a recall election. Some say his progressive policies aren't working. Here are some of them. He aims for diversion whenever possible, believes jail should be a last resort. He does not believe in cash bail or gang enhancements, does not prosecute juveniles as adults, but does bring charges against police who use excessive force. Chesa Boudin, welcome to The Issue Is for the first time.
Thanks so much for having me on. Good to be here.
Your opponents say, of course, you've heard this, that you care more about criminals than crime victims. Among them, a former deputy district attorney who used to work for you but quit the office like Brooke Jenkins. Here's what she said.
What we felt is that he was personally intervening in a number of cases, including our own cases, which involve very serious and violent offenders, in order to garner them lenient sentences.
What's your response to Ms. Jenkins and those who left your office who say that you've got to be recalled?
Well, it's just blatant lies and dishonesty, and it's frustrating to see someone like her who's never run for office, who wasn't elected to the office, and who is so ambitious in trying to promote herself that she ignores facts and evidence and data. I mean, look, I was elected to make changes to the office, and there are folks like her who are fiercely resisting any kinds of changes. They want to go back to the failed tough on crime policies of the 1990s, and that's not going to work for San Francisco voters. It's not going to make us safer. What we've got to do is move forward, and if somebody like her thinks they can do a better job, they're welcome to run for office, to put their views and their specific policy proposals to the San Francisco voters, but that's not what they're doing. In fact, they haven't put forward a single policy proposal. They haven't put forward a single concrete idea for what they would do differently. Instead, they've spent nearly $7 million, largely Republican funded, to attack and undermine policies that are evidence-based, that are supported by the vast majority of San Franciscans, and that will build safer, stronger communities.
There is no doubt that a lot of the money for this recall is from Republicans, but there's also no doubt that there are a lot of Democrats who are frustrated as well. Let's show some video. You've seen images like this with this feeling that maybe criminals don't fear consequences. This is what happened in a Walmart where people are inside and essentially just looting. This was in a Walgreens, and you see, when you see images like this, what goes through your mind?
Well, I'm outraged. I mean, San Franciscan businesses and San Franciscan residents should not have to put up with this kind of brazen crime in their communities, in our stores, or anywhere in our great city. So I share the frustration. I think people who are outraged, it's righteous. The challenge and the dishonesty about the recall is in suggesting that I am somehow responsible for those crimes, or that the recall will do anything to make us safe or prevent them. Let's be very clear. The vast majority of crimes, like all the ones you've just shown your viewers, do not result in arrests. If we are serious about deterrence, if we are serious about having consequences, if we want people who commit crimes to know that there will be consequences for their crimes, the first step is effective policing, arrest, and investigation. No district attorney, not me, not any other district attorney in this country, can prosecute crimes like the ones you just showed if police do not make arrests. And in San Francisco, frustrating for me and for my office, when you see crimes like shoplifting or car break-ins, when they get reported to the police, they're only making arrests in about 2% of all cases. That means 98% of the time, criminals are right to believe they will not have any consequences, but it has nothing to do with me or my office. The truth is, I am prosecuting cases at a higher rate than my predecessor, and I'm leading interagency, multi-jurisdictional task forces that are investigating, detecting, and dismantling massive fencing operations. We recovered more than $8 million in stolen goods from a retail ring that was moving stolen goods from retail organizations and storefronts in San Francisco, throughout the Bay Area, and across the country. We did that in my first year in office. Just weeks ago, we announced the results of a multi-year operation using GPS tracking devices in bait cars that we parked all over San Francisco, so that people who broke into those cars and stole the electronics that we left in them would let us map out the flow of stolen goods. Look, if police are only arresting 1 or 2% of people who commit car break-ins, we are never going to lock up our way out of the problem. We are never going to prosecute or incarcerate our way out of that problem. We need to be smarter, we need to be proactive, and that's exactly the kind of leadership I'm showing as district attorney.
So what do you say to the law enforcement people who say because of things like Prop 47, a lot of those crimes are misdemeanors, not felonies, and because of that, maybe there aren't the arrests?
Well, first of all, Prop 47 was passed way before I was the district attorney. It's state law. It's not specific to San Francisco. Whatever your views on that law are, they have nothing to do with my recall. The second thing I would say is that even after Prop 47, the threshold for a misdemeanor to become a felony, $950 limit in California, is one of the lowest in the country. Even tough on crime, deep red states like Texas have a threshold that's $1,500. In other words, the notion that somehow the problem with property crime in California or in San Francisco is a result of a law that predates me by many, many years is simply ignoring the national context in the 33 states across the country with higher limits. But the third thing, and this is really important, Alex, even if that is somehow the problem, it's still a misdemeanor to steal. My office can and does prosecute misdemeanor thefts. We prosecute crimes that police bring us every day. The fact that police may think a crime should be a felony instead of a misdemeanor doesn't mean they just get to stop doing their job. Imagine if I was frustrated with how the police did their job, with their low clearance rates, for example. And I said, well, police only arrest 1% of reported auto burglaries, so I'm not going to bother prosecuting the ones they bring me. Of course, I can't do that. We all have a job to do, the police, the district attorney, the courts, probation, parole. And whatever police officers think about state law that's been passed by the voters or signed into law by the governor, they have a job to do, and we depend on them to do it.
You've met a lot of people in fighting this recall. Many of them love you. Some of them don't. After this process, what have you learned? And if you're able to stay in the job, have you thought about changing any of the policies or moderating any of the policies?
You know, Alex, it's been a very steep learning curve for me. I took office in January of 2020. I'd never been a prosecutor. I'd never been elected to office before that. I'd certainly never heard of COVID-19, which shut me out of my office just 2 months after I was sworn into it. And so absolutely, I've learned a lot. We've made changes already in a wide array of areas. I believe that we have to be principled. We have to be evidence-based, and we also have to be open to learning from mistakes and recognizing that there is no perfect solution to crime and to violence. And these are challenges we see across the country. If there were some jurisdiction that had solved the problems, that had a magic wand to make crime go away, we'd follow their lead. But we're doing our best, and we're following the evidence and the research, and we're implementing policies that are grounded in San Francisco values and building long-term, vibrant, strong communities.
But is there one specific policy maybe you're thinking about changing?
What we have done, one of the things that we changed already and that I think we need to continue to work on is our policy with regard to parole violations. You know, when I took office, there was a long-standing policy going back about 10 years prior to my administration that district attorneys in San Francisco and actually across the state were not filing their own parole revocations. They were simply deferring to the Division of Parole to make that decision. We learned the hard way that sometimes we have to step up and take the lead. We work with parole, we have tremendous respect for our parole agents, and we also have to take responsibility for filing our own violations when we see frustrating repeat criminal behavior. When I took office, we weren't doing any of them. This year, we've now filed more parole revocations ourselves than the Division of Parole has here in San Francisco.
Lastly, whatever happens in this recall, it's being watched very closely across the state and across the country as a potential bellwether for progressive prosecutors, including in LA County. George Gascon may be facing his own recall election. If this thing succeeds, what do you think the message that's being sent to everyone is by voters?
Well, Alex, the first thing to note is it's not going to succeed, and I'll tell you why. It's not going to succeed because everybody who voters trust is supporting us and opposing the recall. The Democratic Party and the Libertarian Party and the Green Party all say no. The San Francisco Chronicle and the Examiner and Singtao Daily all say vote no on H. And our elected officials, more than a dozen retired judges, as well as the San Francisco Labor Council, the California nurses, the janitors, and the Public School Teachers Union are all urging voters to reject the recall. But the other thing that's really important to note is even the folks who are supporting the recall, even the proponents, the folks like the ones you played clips of a few moments ago, are dishonestly telling voters that they support criminal justice reform. They're calling themselves, without one shred of evidence, progressive prosecutors. And that's important when you look at this from a national perspective. This is not being framed to San Francisco voters as a race between reform and tough on crime policies. The folks who are accepting the Republican Party endorsement and the billionaire Republican stock donations, those folks are lying and calling themselves criminal justice reformers. And they're doing that because they know that the only way to win at the ballot in San Francisco and increasingly across this country is to support criminal justice reform. I'm the real reformer. I'm doing the job I was elected to do. And we are asking voters to vote no on H so I can finish the work you elected me to do.
Chesa Boudin, thank you so much for sharing your views. Good luck on the campaign trail.
Thank you. Good to see you. Have a good day.